Imagine this. It's 1978 in New York City. A brand new skyscraper, the pride of Manhattan, is secretly a ticking time bomb. Less than a year after it opened, its own designer discovers a fatal flaw. A mistake so catastrophic that a single powerful storm could topple the entire building, killing thousands. And here's the crazy part. He was the only person on Earth who knew. So that brings us to the big question. This is the incredible true story behind that hidden danger. It's a tale about a nail-biting race against time. But more than that, it's about the massive ethical choice one engineer had to make: face professional ruin or risk an unimaginable catastrophe. So just how bad was it? Well, these were the odds. By the summer of '78, with hurricane season breathing down their necks, there was a 1 in 16 chance, not in a lifetime, but that very year, that a storm strong enough to bring the whole thing down would hit New York. The tower was a sitting duck. And that quote you see? That's from the man himself, Bill the Messier. He was the brilliant structural engineer who designed the tower. And yeah, he was the only one who truly understood the terrifying scale of his own mistake. Think about that choice. Stay silent and just pray? Or speak up and risk absolutely everything: his career, his reputation, you name it. Okay, to really get how this all went so wrong, we've got to rewind and go back to the beginning. Because the story of this skyscraper isn't just about a near disaster. It's actually about a really groundbreaking piece of engineering that was born from an impossible problem. And that impossible problem? Well, it was a church. St. Peter's Church, to be exact. Citicorp had this prime Manhattan block for its new headquarters, but the church sitting right on the corner, they refused to move. The deal they struck was complicated. A new church would be built on the spot, but the skyscraper couldn't touch it. It couldn't even be built directly over it. So, what do? Le Mesurier came up with this absolutely radical solution. Instead of putting the support columns at the corners like literally every other skyscraper, he had a wild idea: lift the entire 59-story tower 9 stories up on giant stilts. But here's the kicker. He placed them in the middle of each side, not at the corners. It was a genius move that solved the church problem and created this amazing public plaza. But it also created a brand new, massive engineering challenge. And his solution to that puzzle was just elegant. The story goes he first sketched it out on a napkin. He came up with a system of huge, stacked V-shapes. They're called chevrons. This design would basically act as the building's skeleton, funneling all the weight and all the force from the wind down into those 4 massive stilts. Now, this chevron design made the building super light, which is great for efficiency, but it created a new problem. It meant the tower would sway. A lot. Like uncomfortably so. To fix this, Le Mesurier installed something truly cutting edge: the very first tuned mass damper ever used in a skyscraper. Think of it as a 400-ton concrete counterweight floating on oil that would slide to counteract the building's sway. It was built for comfort, but ironically, it would end up being the tower's last desperate line of defense. So the building opens in 1977. Everybody loves it, critics are raving, it's seen as a total triumph. Everything's perfect. For about a year. And then, 2 seemingly minor things happen that start to pull a thread, unraveling the whole project and exposing that terrifying secret. Okay, so here's what happened. First, in May of 1978, Le Mesurier finds out that a cost-saving change was made during construction without him really knowing the full implications. Some absolutely critical joints in that chevron system, they were bolted, not welded, like in his original plans. A big difference. Then, just a month later, his phone rings. It's an engineering student writing a paper on the building, and this student has a few questions that just won't go away. You have to understand, the standard way to do things back then, the way Le Mesurier's team did it, was to calculate for perpendicular winds. That means wind hitting the flat face of the building straight on. It makes sense, right? That's where you'd think the most force would be. But that student's nagging question made Le Mesurier go back and double-check his math. This time, he ran the numbers for what are called quartering winds. That's when the wind hits the corner of the building. And what he found must have made his blood run cold. Instead of being weaker, a cornering wind actually created this bizarre aerodynamic effect that increased the stress on those critical chevron joints by an incredible 40%. And here's where the two problems collide. You take that overlooked 40% stress increase from the quartering winds, and you combine it with the fact that the joints were bolted instead of welded. The result was a catastrophe waiting to happen. Just look at this. A joint on the 30th floor that actually needed 14 bolts to be safe under these conditions had only 4. The building wasn't just flawed, it was dangerously, fatally underdesigned. So now, Le Mesurier is facing an absolute ethical nightmare. If he speaks up, he's looking at professional ruin, lawsuits, bankruptcy, the end of his career. But if he stays quiet, he's gambling with thousands of lives. He made a choice. He decided to act. And in doing so, he kicked off one of the most insane and secretive repair jobs in history. The first thing he did was call Citicorp's chairman, and together they hatched a top-secret plan. They even gave it a code name, Project Serene. The mission? To secretly reinforce all 200 of the tower's weakened joints before Mother Nature could find the building's Achilles heel. Picture this. Every single night, after the last person in the office turned out their lights and went home, a team of welders would slip into the building. They'd rip open the drywall, find a weakened joint, and weld these huge 2-inch thick steel plates over them, like giant metal Band-Aids. And then they had to put it all back together perfectly before the first employee showed up in the morning. Absolutely no one could know what was happening. And while this was happening, a massive secret operation was going on behind the scenes. They worked with the Red Cross to draft an evacuation plan for 10 whole city blocks, just in case. They rushed to install strain gauges to monitor the building's stress in real time. They put out a white light of the press, something about routine reinforcements. And then they got the luckiest break imaginable. Every single newspaper in New York City went on strike. A total media blackout. You couldn't make this stuff up. The welders are working frantically, night after night, but they're only about halfway done with the repairs. And that's when it happens. Their single greatest fear, the one thing they were racing against, materializes on the weather map. A powerful hurricane, and it's heading straight for New York. Her name was Hurricane Ella. On September 1st, 1978, this monster of a storm, with winds over 200 kilometers per hour, just stopped. Right off the coast. Aimed like a loaded gun at Manhattan. If it made landfall, the half-repaired tower wouldn't just be damaged, it would almost certainly collapse. That secret evacuation plan, it was on standby. For 24 straight, agonizing hours, the team could do nothing but watch and wait. Le Mesurier himself that they were sweating blood. And then, relief. A miracle. At the very last minute, Hurricane Ella took a sharp right turn and veered harmlessly out into the Atlantic. The city and the skyscraper were spared. By October, the repairs were finally finished, and the tower was secure. And would you believe it, for almost 20 years, this whole story, Project Serene, it was one of the best-kept secrets in engineering. But then, in 1995, an article in The New Yorker blew the lid off the whole thing, and it sent absolute shockwaves through the entire industry. It changed everything. And here's the amazing part. Instead of being shamed, Le Mesurier was celebrated as a hero for his integrity. The impact was immediate. New York City changed its building codes to account for those quartering winds. The tuned mass damper he pioneered, it became standard practice in skyscrapers all over the world. And the Citicorp case itself? Well, it's now a classic case study taught in pretty much every engineering ethics class. When you really think about it, this incredible story isn't just about a skyscraper with a flaw. It's about what happens when someone is faced with their own very human mistake. It really makes you wonder, what is the true responsibility of a professional? And what kind of courage does it take to raise your hand and say, I was wrong, especially when thousands of lives are hanging in the balance?